Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Valerie here on the way to the practice this week. Twice this week. You don't normally find me traveling into the office quite so much. I'm performing some mission critical roles this week. Really helps to know what your job is when you are the leader of your team. One of the things I wanted to come on and have a chat with you because I have been approached by practitioners who have a solid solo practice, who, doing everything right to service their clients, to get their professional training, and because there's opportunity and demand, now want to grow their business to hire others. And I've got some things to say about that, because I often think that when we are building a team and scaling our business and our private practices, we may get the order a little bit wrong. So I want to provide you my opinions of what I think really needs to happen and how that's part of your mission critical role as a leader, no matter how big you get and no matter how sophisticated and advanced you get in your leadership practice. So here's my opinion. When I get approached by solo practitioners looking to expand, it's usually because they've got too much work. They're seeing the need in the community and they want to get more people into their business, and they believe they've got the beginnings of some infrastructure because they're already doing bookings and billings and invoicing and clinical notes and things like that. And so it should be a matter of bringing other people on board, and they should be able to replicate and do the same. And so very often the question that I get when I'm asked if I might be able to input into their expansion and try to get them equipped as leaders is a hodgepodge really of what are business practices, leadership practices, and the last thing that gets looked at is the clinical practice. And I'm not surprised. I know, because I have been there. I very much put, the clinical practice last. And so very often I find one of the first two questions that come up when I'm having this sort of a conversation is, number one, how do I make sure that I get all the legals right so that I don't make a mistake? The contracts, how do I understand casual employees, full-time employees, and how do I make sure that I'm paying the right pay? So, I call that, some part of that is governance, right? So in my model, there are three core leadership roles that a private practice owner needs to hang on to till the very end, until you have someone who can 100,000% take it off you. Clinical leadership, operational leadership, and governance leadership. So to me, those are governance questions. Then the next common one is, can you then help me to do marketing? Because, I've got a solid reputation and I've got a solid referral base, but I'm really nervous that if I bring someone else on board, I'm not going to be able to feed their diary. And they might leave me, they might leave and resign, and, what a waste of time and effort and all of that. So can you help me with the marketing? And here it's very interesting to me to see how individuals who are starting to think about their business as a business, think about marketing. It's usually about, websites and social media and all of that. To me, those are operational issues. And look, I'll do another video at another time about marketing. Marketing is not a machine. Think about the number of things that come across your feed. People don't just sit there passively waiting for your marketing thing to attach to their eyeballs and then, go, I'm now going to sign up. It doesn't work that way. Marketing at the foundation startup phase of a private practice has a very different function and purpose to when you're at a stable scale size. Okay, but here's the thing that people forget, and it's often the last thing, and honest to goodness, the very first thing that is likely to cause you grief in your business, and that is clinical standards. And I'd work more more really with private practice owners in the last year in this area than in any other area. What are clinical standards? So let me tell you that one of my first jobs, other than being a music teacher, I taught music from the age of 13, and even then I followed a whole system. Well, actually, let's use that example, shall you? How did a 13-year-old get the courage and the conviction to teach music? Well, I learned from a Japanese music school from the time when, I don't know, I was really little. My parents sent me to the Yamaha Music Foundation, and they had various books and levels and systems. So you learned how to read music, that was one foundation. Then you learned how to listen to the music, that was another foundation. And then you had to learn how to read music, that was another foundation. And before you actually really played any fancy music through the Yamaha Music Foundation, you had to learn all these foundations. And one of the other layers was you had to learn how to improvise, which is possibly why I just can never play something straight anymore. Then you learn chords, etc., etc. Now, using that system, by the time you have finished the it's almost like preschool version of music, you're playing very little songs. Their aim is not to get you to look good in front of your parents or friends. Their aim is to really get those foundations really solid. And so by the time you finish, that set of books, you probably only learned a couple of songs that really just use the same notes. But you've developed your ear. You've learned to listen, you've learned to pitch, you've learned to sing back. My music teacher used to say, anything that you can sing in your head, you can actually play. So if you listen to music, you'll be able to replicate sound and things like that. And those foundations actually are what you get trained in and assessed in the Yamaha principle, or at least when I did it, all the way up through your levels. And so I actually failed one of my final exams. So in the music school, in this particular system, you have the performance exams. Now, they didn't have theory exams per se. They have what they call musicianship exams. So underneath your performance exams, you also were graded on your musicianship, on all those things that I just said, sight reading, listening, replicating, ad-libbing, and all of those things, improv and what have you, composition, arrangement, all of those things. And in order to get an associate level with the Yamaha Music Foundation, in other words, a teaching qualification, you have to sit a very hard set of exams. And I was 15 when I set this exam. I'd just come over from Malaysia, we moved when I was 11. We moved to another suburb, and I had to find a new music teacher who wouldn't take me on, but then when he learned that I was finished by age 15, he made space for me. But I failed that exam for lots of reasons, right? I'm 15. I don't really have the sophistication at that point of a lot of things. Anyway, I failed that, and I was really intimidated to take that exam again for a few years. And the wisdom of my music teacher at that point, we detoured. I didn't do that. I went and did a different set of exams. I took up the piano as a bit of a detour, and a little bit later, when he thought that I was ready to take that exam, he put that on the front burner. It was very much tied to, I was, getting ready to be in senior level high school, starting to compete, etc. And he thought that he saw the possibility for me to start teaching music. But anyway, that whole system gave me the courage to start teaching when I was 13, because basically you teach what you know, and there's a set system and foundations that I knew I could follow, right? I kept all of my books. Now, that sort of a model is very much what we need to remember when we're expanding our business in the clinical space. You forget that you have been a practitioner for years. Many of the things that you do are intuitive. Many of the things are so practiced and rehearsed that you've achieved a level of mastery that you don't even know. You are able to see how to shift your treatment protocols, how to adapt your posture with your client, how to slow down, how to pick up, and all of those things, because you are very, very practiced and very, very rehearsed. And much like I'm doing right now, driving, you don't even think about what you do. But let me say this, I can't stress this more because this will come back and bite you. You actually need to focus on this space when you are hiring people. Much like that music school foundation that I had that broke up all the components of musicianship before you can even play an instrument, you need to figure what that is in your clinical work. So clinical leadership and standards is, for me, something that I still hang on in my business because it's also very tricky for clinical team leads who you're mentoring to do supervision and do the clinical content things to unpack for other people. But why you need to actually keep your eye on this is when you start to bring people into your business, they're not going to necessarily know what your treatment philosophy is, what your approach is, what your rapport is. Just as an example, I'm very, very keen for psychologists who work with children to dress comfortably and be on the floor. It's one of the reasons why we select the furniture the way that we do, and we've got shaggy rugs on the floor because we want them. And a lot of times it's not that psychologists who are coming in don't know that to do this. They don't even know that they have permission to do this, right? So referrers and friends and word of mouth also don't know why or what it is that you do in your sessions that makes you so attractive that they want to send other people there. They don't know what you're doing in your room. So you need to know what you're doing. You need to know from the minute someone finds you, calls, makes inquiries, books in, first appointment, follow-ups, all of those things. You need to know what those sets of behaviors are, and then group them into standards, group them into professional practice, and group them into client, customer, into treatment process. That is the reason why I'm going into the practice this week lots, because we are in the process of calibrating some of our processes. We've had new team members and we've had people who've been with us for quite some time, and it's time for us to calibrate our practices. It's something that I highly recommend you do for every new practitioner in our process for the first 8 weeks, sometimes up to 3 months. Every new practitioner goes through a calibration process with us. It comes off of an induction process that goes through every step in terms of onboarding our clients, to seeing them, to writing up any reports or letters. And then it comes through as they practice, as they're starting to see clients, to then do a feedback informed process, which gives them really short and immediate feedback in the formative stage. You do not want to have this missing when you are growing a practice, when you are growing a team, because it will be very, very, very unfair down the line if you start to call people up on their practices when you actually haven't helped them to identify or align their practices to yours. That's my little tip for you today. Hope you have a really great day. It's time for me to just drive mindfully. See you later.